No wealthy family, no connections, no head start. And somehow they build a business, build wealth, and completely rewrite their circumstances, while someone else in the identical starting position stays stuck for a decade. Luck plays a role, but when psychologists study this pattern closely, luck stops being the main variable. What shows up instead is a specific set of mental habits, each one independently studied, each one with actual data behind it. 5 of them explain most of the gap. Let's break them down. They learn to delay gratification. In the late 1960s, psychologist Walter Mischel ran what became one of the most famous studies in psychology, the Stanford marshmallow experiment. Children were offered 1 marshmallow now, or 2 if they could wait alone in a room for several minutes without eating it. The wait itself wasn't the interesting part. The follow-up decades later was. Mischel's longitudinal data found that children who managed to delay gratification tended to show better outcomes years later, including academic performance and life measures tied to long-term goal pursuit. People who build wealth from nothing tend to run that same experiment daily, just with bigger stakes than a marshmallow. Saving instead of spending, learning instead of relaxing, investing instead of consuming. Small, repeated delays compound the same way Mischel's data suggested they would. 2. They change their identity before their circumstances change. Psychologists Hazel Markus and Paula Nurius introduced a concept in 1986 called possible selves. The idea that people carry mental images, not just of who they are now, but of who they could become, and that those imagined future selves actively shape present-day behavior. Their research found that a clearly imagined possible self functions almost like a target. It gives current decisions a direction to move toward before any external evidence confirms the direction is working. That's the mechanism behind identity shifting before circumstances do. The bank account hasn't changed yet. The mental target has. And Markus and Nurius' research suggests behavior tends to follow that target, not the other way around. 3. They become less emotionally reactive. Psychologist James Gross developed what's now one of the most widely used frameworks in the field, the Process Model of Emotion Regulation, published in 1998, which maps out the specific points where people can intervene in an emotional response before it takes over a decision. Gross's research found that people who regulate effectively aren't suppressing emotion or avoiding it. They're intervening earlier in the process, reappraising a setback before it curdles into a decision made purely out of fear or frustration. Setbacks, mistakes, and rejection don't disappear for people building wealth from nothing. Gross's model just explains why those emotions stop being the ones steering the car. 4. They develop a high tolerance for uncertainty. Psychologist Else Frenkel-Brunswik's research, dating back to 1949, introduced the concept of intolerance of ambiguity, a measurable trait describing how uncomfortable a person is with unclear, unpredictable, or unresolved situations. Her work found this trait varies significantly between individuals, and that high intolerance of ambiguity reliably predicts avoidance of exactly the kinds of situations wealth building requires: unproven ventures, unclear outcomes, decisions made without complete information. People who build from nothing tend to sit at the other end of that spectrum. Not fearless, just able to act inside uncertainty, rather than waiting for it to resolve first, which, by Frenkel-Brunswik's data, it usually never fully does. 5. They focus more on skills than status. Psychologist Carol Dweck's decades of research on mindset drew a sharp line between two orientations. A fixed mindset focused on proving existing ability, and a growth mindset focused on developing new ability over time. Her studies found that growth-minded individuals treat setbacks as data rather than verdicts, and consistently invest more in skill development because they don't experience the process as a referendum on their worth. That maps directly onto the skills over status pattern. Status is a fixed mindset reward. It needs to be defended. Skill is a growth mindset investment. It compounds. Dweck's research suggests the second orientation is what actually produces the resources that make status possible in the first place, not the reverse. Final thoughts. The people who build wealth from nothing usually aren't the smartest or the luckiest people in the room. What the research keeps finding instead is a set of trainable patterns, the capacity to wait, shown by Mischel's data, a clear internal target, per Markus and Nurius, emotional regulation, mapped by Gross, a working relationship with uncertainty, per Frenkel-Brunswik, and a growth orientation towards skill, per Dweck. None of these guarantee an outcome. All 5 together dramatically shift the odds. Wealth rarely arrives in a single moment. Based on this research, it looks more like the compound result of thousands of small decisions, each one shaped by which of these 5 patterns a person happened to be running. If you're into the psychology behind success, growth, and how the mind shapes outcomes, subscribe. Because here, we don't just describe behavior, we trace it back to the research.